As they auctioned a widow and her baby, the millionaire cowboy said, "I'll take them." The small frontier town of Red Valley was quiet in the way old towns often are. Quiet, but not peaceful. Dust covered the wooden roads, and the wind carried the smell of dry wood, old leather, and forgotten dreams. People here lived simple lives, but hardship had slowly made them cold. Smiles were rare, and kindness even rarer. On this day, something unusual was happening in the center of town. A wooden platform had been set up near the old trading post. A crowd had gathered, not out of joy or celebration, but out of curiosity. They stood in small groups, whispering to each other, waiting for something they did not fully want to see. On the platform stood a young widow. She looked tired, like life had taken more from her than she could ever give back. Her clothes were simple and worn, and her eyes carried a sadness that words could not explain. In her arms, she held a small baby wrapped in a thin blanket. The baby was quiet, sleeping softly, unaware of the world around him. The widow's name was Clara, though few people in town cared to remember it. After her husband passed away, life had become very difficult for her. She had no land, no family nearby, and no way to support herself. Days turned into struggles, and nights turned into long moments of worry. She had tried everything she could think of, working small jobs, asking for help, even selling what little she owned, but nothing was enough. Now she stood here, not by choice, but because she had nowhere else to go. The town officials had made a harsh decision. They said she could not stay without support, and they had arranged something they called a public arrangement. In truth, it was nothing more than a cruel auction. Men from nearby ranches and towns had been invited, not to help her, but to take responsibility for her situation. Everyone knew what that meant, even if no one said it directly. Clara kept her eyes down. She held her baby closer, as if that could protect him from the world. Her heart was heavy, but she did not cry anymore. She had cried too much in the past weeks, and now there were no tears left. The auctioneer, a tall man with a loud voice, stepped forward. He adjusted his hat and looked at the crowd. "All right," he said, clearing his throat. "We will begin. This woman and child need care. Start the bids." A heavy silence followed. No one spoke at first. Some men looked uncomfortable. Others looked at Clara and then away quickly, as if she was something they did not want to acknowledge. A few whispered to each other, but no one raised a hand. Finally, a man from the back shouted a low offer. It was not kind. It was not respectful. It sounded more like he was bidding on an object than a human life. A few men laughed quietly, and that laughter made Clara feel smaller than ever. She closed her eyes for a moment, holding her baby tighter. The auction continued, but the energy in the crowd felt wrong. It was not excitement. It was discomfort mixed with cruelty. Every new offer felt colder than the last. Clara could hear everything, even when she tried not to listen. Each word felt like it was cutting into her hope. Then, something changed. The sound of horse hooves came from the edge of town. Slow, steady, confident. The crowd turned slightly, curious, but not alarmed. A rider was approaching. He was dressed in dark clothing, and his horse was strong and well kept. There was something different about him. Not loud, not showy, but powerful in a quiet way. He stopped just outside the crowd. For a moment, he did not move. He simply looked at the scene in front of him. His eyes went from the auctioneer to the widow, then to the baby in her arms. His expression did not show anger or surprise. It showed something deeper: thought, memory, and maybe even pain. People around him did not recognize him immediately. He was not from this town. Some whispered that he was a wealthy ranch owner from far away, a man who rarely got involved in local matters. Others said he avoided people completely unless there was business involved. The auctioneer noticed him and called out, trying to regain control of the moment. "Are you here to bid, sir?" he asked. The rider did not answer right away. He slowly dismounted his horse and stepped forward. His boots hit the ground with a steady confidence. He walked through the crowd without rushing, without hesitation. Clara looked up for the first time. Her eyes met his for a brief second. She did not know who he was, but something about his gaze made her feel uncertain. It was not cruelty she saw there. It was something else, something she could not name. The wind moved through the square again, and the silence grew heavier. The cowboy stopped near the front of the crowd. Everyone waited. And then, he spoke words that changed everything. But no one yet knew why he had come, or what he truly intended to do. The dusty square of Red Valley felt even quieter after the stranger arrived. The wind moved slowly between the wooden buildings, carrying away small whispers from the crowd. Everyone was still watching the cowboy who had just stepped off his horse. No one spoke. No one even dared to breathe too loudly. Clara, the young widow, stood frozen on the wooden platform. Her arms were still wrapped tightly around her baby. She did not understand what was happening. She had seen many men come and go during the auction, but none had ever looked at her the way this man did. His eyes were calm, but deep, like he had seen pain before and did not fear it. The auctioneer cleared his throat again, trying to bring attention back to the process. He forced a nervous smile and spoke loudly. "We have new interest, it seems," he said. "Sir, if you wish to bid, you must speak clearly." The cowboy did not rush. He took one step forward, his boots pressed into the dry ground, leaving small marks in the dust. The crowd shifted slightly, making space for him without even realizing it. Something about him made people step back. Clara looked at him again. Her heart was beating faster now. She had no hope left, but still, a small part of her wondered why this stranger had come. A man in the crowd laughed quietly. Another whispered something rude to his friend. Some of the bidders were already irritated. They had been treating the auction like a game, and now this silent stranger was interrupting it. One of them called out, "Who are you supposed to be? This is not a place for heroes." The cowboy did not look at him. His eyes stayed on Clara and the baby. There was no anger in his face, only focus. The auctioneer tried again. "State your bid, sir, or step aside." For a moment, there was only silence. Even the wind seemed to stop. Then the cowboy finally spoke. "I'll take them." His voice was calm, not loud, not dramatic, but strong enough that everyone heard it clearly. The crowd went completely still. For a second, no one reacted. It was as if they were trying to understand what they had just heard. Clara's breath stopped in her throat. She looked up at him again, confused and afraid. The auctioneer blinked. "Sir, this is not a simple purchase. You understand what this means?" The cowboy nodded slightly. "I understand." The men in the crowd began to murmur. Some were shocked, others were annoyed, a few even laughed, thinking it was a joke. But the cowboy did not move. He stayed steady, like a wall that could not be shaken. One of the bidders stepped forward. He was a rough-looking man with a harsh voice. "You don't even know her," he said. "Why would you waste money on a broken widow and a child?" The cowboy turned his head slowly. His eyes met the man's. There was something in that look that made the man stop talking immediately. Then the cowboy said quietly, "That is enough." The man stepped back without saying another word. The auctioneer, still unsure, asked again, "Are you sure about this bid?" The cowboy reached into his coat. He pulled out a small leather pouch. Without hesitation, he placed it in the auctioneer's hand. It was heavy, more than enough to cover every bid and more. Gasps spread through the crowd. This was not a small amount. This was the kind of money most people in Red Valley could not even imagine seeing in their lifetime. Clara stared at him in disbelief. Her mind could not understand what was happening. Why would someone spend so much on her? She was nobody. She had nothing left to offer the world except a child she barely had strength to raise. The auctioneer slowly counted the payment. His expression changed from doubt to surprise, then to respect. Finally, he nodded. "The bid is accepted." A strange silence followed. The auction was over, but no one moved. People were still trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Clara was told to step down from the platform. Her legs felt weak as she carefully came down, still holding her baby tightly. She did not know whether to feel safe or afraid. The cowboy stepped closer to her. She instinctively took a step back. She had learned not to trust kindness too quickly. Life had taught her that lesson in the hardest way. He stopped a few feet away, giving her space. "I am not here to harm you," he said quietly. His voice was softer now, less distant. Clara did not answer. She only looked at him, trying to read his face. But there were no easy answers there. Behind them, the crowd slowly began to break apart. People were still whispering, still confused, still watching. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others simply walked away, pretending they had not seen anything. The cowboy turned slightly and looked at the road ahead. His horse waited patiently behind him. Then he spoke again, this time with a tone that carried something deeper. "You and the child are coming with me." Clara's heart tightened. She did not move. She did not speak. She had been saved from the auction, but she had no idea what kind of life was waiting for her now. The journey out of Red Valley was long and quiet. The cowboy rode in front, leading the way on his strong black horse. Behind him, Clara sat carefully in a small covered wagon. She held her baby close the entire time, as if afraid that even the wind might try to take him away. The road stretched through dry land, broken hills, and empty fields that seemed to have no end. Clara did not speak. She did not know what to say. Her mind was full of questions, but her mouth stayed silent. She kept watching the back of the man who had taken her from the auction. He had not spoken much since they left town. He only guided the horses and watched the road ahead. After several hours, they finally reached a large ranch far away from the town. It was surrounded by open land and tall wooden fences. The house was big, stronger than most buildings Clara had ever seen. But it did not feel warm. It felt quiet, almost too quiet. The cowboy stopped the wagon and helped Clara down. She hesitated for a moment before stepping onto the ground. Her legs were tired, and her arms ached from holding the baby for so long. "This is your place now," he said simply. Clara looked around. There were barns, horses, and wide empty spaces. A few workers moved in the distance, but no one came close. Everything felt organized, but lonely. She finally found her voice. Why did you bring me here?" The cowboy did not answer right away. He removed his hat and looked toward the horizon as if searching for words that were not easy to find. "Because you had nowhere else to go," he said at last. That answer did not satisfy her. It only made more questions rise in her mind. But before she could ask anything else, he turned and walked toward the house. Clara stood there, unsure whether to follow or stay where she was. Eventually, she followed slowly, carrying her child. Inside the house, everything was clean and well kept. There was furniture, warm blankets, and food stored neatly in the kitchen. But it still felt empty. It was the kind of place where people lived, but did not stay emotionally. The cowboy showed her a small room. "You and the child will stay here," he said. Clara entered slowly. The room was simple, but safe. There was a bed and a small crib already placed in the corner. She stopped when she saw it. "How?" she began, but the cowboy had already walked away. That night, Clara could not sleep. She sat on the bed, holding her baby, listening to the strange silence of the ranch. Every sound outside made her nervous. Horses moving, wind blowing, wood creaking. Everything felt unfamiliar. She did not trust the man who had brought her here. She did not understand him. No one spends that much money on a stranger without reason. She kept thinking about it again and again, but no answer came. Outside, the cowboy stood near the barn. The night air was cold, but he did not seem to notice. He looked at the sky, lost in thought. One of his workers approached him carefully. "Boss," the man said, "people in town are talking. They don't understand what you did today." The cowboy did not respond immediately. He kept looking at the dark horizon. After a moment, he said, "Let them talk." The worker hesitated. "And the woman?" The cowboy finally turned his head slightly. "She is not their concern." That was all he said. Days began to pass at the ranch. Clara slowly adjusted to her new surroundings. She stayed mostly inside her room, taking care of her baby. She tried to help where she could, but she always kept distance from the cowboy. He, on the other hand, rarely spoke to her. He worked from morning until night. He fixed fences, checked horses, and managed the land. But every day he made sure food was brought to her room. He never said much, just left things at the door and walked away. Clara noticed small things. The crib had been carefully built. The blankets were soft and new. The food was always enough, never less. It confused her. Someone so quiet and distant was still taking care of them in every small detail. One evening, a strong storm began to build outside. The sky turned dark, and heavy winds shook the ranch. Clara sat inside her room, holding her baby tightly. The sound of thunder made the windows tremble. Suddenly, there was a knock at her door. She froze. No one usually came at this hour. Slowly, she opened the door a little. It was the cowboy. He stood there holding a lantern. "The storm is strong tonight," he said. "Stay inside. Do not go out." Clara nodded silently. She expected him to leave immediately, but he did not. He stood there for a moment longer, looking at the baby in her arms. For the first time, his expression changed slightly. It was softer, almost human. Then he said quietly, "You are safe here." Clara looked at him carefully. She wanted to believe him, but trust did not come easily anymore. Before she could reply, he turned and walked away into the storm. That night, as the wind howled across the ranch, Clara lay awake once again. But this time, something was different. The fear was still there, but so was a small question growing inside her heart. Who exactly was this man? And why did he care so much about two strangers? Outside, the cowboy stood alone in the rain, as if carrying a secret too heavy to share. The storm over the ranch had finally passed, leaving behind wet ground and a quiet morning. The air smelled fresh, but the silence felt heavy. Everything looked calm again, yet something inside the house was about to change. Clara woke early that day. Her baby was still sleeping peacefully in the crib the cowboy had built. For the first time in many nights, she had not been disturbed by fear. Still, her heart was not calm. She kept thinking about the man who had brought her here. His silence, his actions, and the way he always stayed distant. None of it made sense to her. Outside, the ranch was already active. Workers moved around, fixing broken fences from the storm. Horses were being checked. The cowboy stood near the barn, watching everything as usual. He looked calm, but his eyes showed that something was bothering him. One of the workers came running toward him. "Boss?" the man said quickly. "There are riders coming from the east." The cowboy's expression changed immediately. He turned his head toward the road. His face became serious. "How many?" he asked. "5, maybe 6 men," the worker replied. "They look armed." A cold silence followed. Clara, inside the house, heard voices outside. She slowly stepped toward the window. From a distance, she saw dust rising on the road. Riders were approaching fast. Her heart began to race again. She did not understand what was happening, but fear returned instantly. She held her baby tightly. Outside, the cowboy moved with calm control. He did not panic. He gave short instructions to his men. "Keep the gates closed," he said. "Stay ready." The riders reached the ranch and stopped at the main gate. The leader of the group stepped forward. He was a harsh-looking man, wearing a long coat and carrying a gun at his side. "I am looking for the woman you took from Red Valley," he shouted. "She belongs to a debt agreement. You had no right to take her." The cowboy stood still, facing him through the gate. "Leave this place," the cowboy said calmly. The man laughed. "Or what? You think you can buy everything?" The tension grew stronger. Clara watched from the window, her hands shaking. She could not understand why people were after her. She had already lost everything once. She did not want to lose it again. The cowboy slowly walked closer to the gate. His voice was steady. "She is not property," he said. "And she is not going anywhere." The man outside narrowed his eyes. "Then you are protecting her for a reason. What is she to you?" For a moment there was silence. The cowboy did not answer immediately. The wind moved gently across the ranch. Then he spoke, and his words carried a weight that changed everything. "I knew her husband," he said. Clara froze inside the house. The cowboy continued. "He saved my life years ago. He paid my debts when I had nothing. I promised him I would return the favor if anything ever happened to him." The riders outside looked confused. The leader frowned. "So this is about honor?" he said. "It is about keeping a promise," the cowboy replied. Clara stood near the window, shocked. She had never known this. Her husband had never spoken about such a thing in detail. She suddenly felt tears in her eyes, not from fear this time, but from emotion she could not explain. The leader of the riders stepped back slightly. He looked at his men, unsure, but pride kept him from leaving easily. "You think words will stop us?" he said. The cowboy's expression did not change. "No," he said, "but truth will." For a moment, no one moved. Even the horses seemed restless. Then, slowly, the riders began to turn away. The leader gave one last angry look before signaling his men. They left. The dust settled again, and silence returned to the ranch. Clara finally stepped outside, still holding her baby. Her legs felt weak, but she needed answers. She walked slowly toward the cowboy. He turned when he saw her approaching. For once, he did not walk away. "You knew him?" she asked softly. The cowboy nodded. "He was a good man," he said. "Brave, loyal. He helped many people, even when he had nothing himself." Clara looked down, trying to process everything. "Then why did you take us from that place?" she asked. The cowboy looked at the ranch around them. "Because your life was still tied to his debt," he said. "And people like that never stop chasing what they think is owed." Clara's voice shook slightly. "So, I was just part of a promise?" The cowboy paused. Then he shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "You were never just that." A soft silence followed. Clara looked at him carefully. For the first time, she saw something different in his eyes. Not distance, not coldness, but something closer to care, even if he did not know how to show it. Days later, life at the ranch slowly became calmer. The danger did not return. The workers went back to their routines. The land felt peaceful again. Clara stayed longer in her room at first, but slowly she began to step outside. She watched the fields, the horses, and the open sky. Her baby grew stronger, and the fear in her heart slowly started to fade. The cowboy still did not speak much, but he no longer felt like a stranger. He became someone who stood nearby, quietly protecting what he had once promised to save. One evening, Clara stood outside watching the sunset. The cowboy came and stood a few steps away. "You can leave any time you want," he said quietly. Clara looked at him. For the first time, she answered without fear. "I don't think I want to." The wind moved gently across the ranch. The sun slowly disappeared behind the hills. And in that quiet moment, something new began. Not ownership, not debt, but the start of a second chance no one had expected. And as the dust slowly settled over Red Valley, the stranger who had changed everything remained a mystery, one that was only beginning to unfold.